Hi there, Audrey Addison Williams, President 2020. I'm joining a little early just to make sure that the sound and everything is working. I'm excited about speaking with you today. Dr. Shauna Costin, thank you for being there. And so, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you to those that will join. Thank you to all of you that have shared my last live. And thank you for your confidence in me and your willingness to hear what I have to say. I'm going to talk very specifically over the next 30 minutes about the criminal justice system and what's happening now. I'm going to talk about Black Lives Matter. I'm going to talk about the partisan divide, the two-party system. And I'm going to issue a call to action. People who know me know that I resist loyalty to any particular thought. Letitia Thomas Russell. I was raised to be a critical thinker. I think the first word that I learned that really drove my mother crazy was not mother or daddy, it was why. And I've spent my entire life questioning everything. And so some of what you hear today may disturb you. We are so used to thinking in terms of black and white, us versus them, right and left, that I'm going to have to ask you to listen deeply and to listen closely, because what you hear is not going to be what you're used to hearing based upon your particular political affiliation and philosophy of life. I personally do not believe that the biggest problem that we face today is Donald Trump. I don't believe the biggest problem is the Republican Party. I don't believe the biggest problem is the Democrat Party. I don't believe the biggest problem are the police. Goswami from India. The biggest challenge that we face, I believe, is what I call simplistic thinking. We as Americans, we the people, are woefully ignorant, woefully uninformed, high righteous hour. And in many cases, we're too lazy mentally to even be engaged in ways that help us to be informed. The few control the many with our permission. And the way the system is set up to know exactly what to say to who, to keep the status quo in power. Simplistic thinking is when we see the world as black and white, right and wrong, left and right, Democrat, Republican. Hello, Kyle Cass. Simplistic thinking is when we allow someone else to control the narrative and when we fail to ask the questions, the right questions. So I'm going to give you some examples of this in a few minutes, but first let me just share. Most of you know that I ran for president in 2016. I was not able to get on the ballot. And many people said to me the same thing that some of you are saying now. But we can't support you, Audrey. We have to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get elected. We need Hillary. And some of those same people later said, we sure wish we had supported you. But I wonder if you know that $6.5 billion went into the campaigns in 2016. This was a presidential campaign and the campaign for the House and the Senate. $6.5 billion went into that campaign. That is enough money to completely resolve the lead pipe issue and the water problem in Flint. That is destroying lives, destroying health. Hillary Clinton held a rally in Flint when she was running, and nothing happened. It's enough money to give every public school teacher in America a $2,000 a year raise. And so I ask you, how did the American public, how did you benefit from the $6.5 billion that was spent on the 2016 campaign? How is your life different? How is the life of your children and your family and your grandchildren different? Think about that. Do you have any idea how much Joe Biden raised last month, in the month of May? Now, the month of May, for most Americans, well, let's say for many Americans, was a month of tragedy, of hardship, of financial distress. There are people who were gainfully employed in March who are standing in lines for food, who are being evicted. In Kentucky, people are in lines blocks long because they've not gotten unemployment. The month of May was a very difficult month for many Americans, for many Democrats. Joe Biden, in the month of May, raised $81 million. Think about that. Joe Biden, in the month of May, raised $81 million. President Obama supported Hillary Clinton, and we all know he's an amazing fundraiser, and she lost. And he just announced, or Biden announced, that President Obama is on board now to help him raise money because he needs to outraise Donald Trump. If he's going to be president, $81 million is a drop in the bucket, folks. What about you? What about you? Donald Trump has raised tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I think altogether he's raised $500 million. And so I ask, how are the farmers? The farmers are getting subsidies from the government because of the failed trade laws, the trade with China. A lot of people don't know that, but the government is paying subsidies to farmers because Donald Trump didn't keep his promise. For those that voted for Donald Trump, how is your life different? What I've heard from some people is 2 years in a row, I got to raise up my Social Security. I've made some money in the stock market. Well, we all got a $1,200 stimulus check, or most of us did. But politicians on the left and right got business loans. What was in that stimulus package? What was in that stimulus package? And what will be in the next? $81 million last month. And so if things continue to go as they are, the cost of this presidential campaign, when it's over, will be over $1 billion. And how will your life be different? Think about it. The few control the many because we allow them. There's a website, opensecrets.org, that anybody has access to. And I want to go back to simplistic thinking, black and white. The few control the many because we let them. And what I find is if you are a Democrat, you are hesitant to ask the tough questions to Democrats. If you are a Republican, often you never even think that there are tough questions to ask. And let me give you some examples. A number of Democrats who are presently in the Senate voted against our being able to buy drugs, prescription drugs, from Canada. And I'm sure some of you know that, and some of you don't. To be able to buy prescription drugs from Canada would be a blessing, an amazing benefit for millions and millions of Americans because of the cost of drugs. There are many people who have to make a decision between food and buying medicine, especially in the middle class. Prescription medicine is very expensive. So why would Democrats, the party of the people, the party for us, why would the Democrats vote against our being able to buy drugs from Canada? Well, when I raised this issue to several of my progressive and liberal friends, and they said, oh, but you know that's not true. You know that the media didn't tell the full story. And, well, yes and no. Simplistic thinking means that because this is true, this also cannot be true. That you can't hold two opposing thoughts, or you can't hold information in your mind that contradicts each other and say that both are true. And so if you Google the Democrats who voted against this, you'll find several articles, and then you'll find a liberal progressive article that says that what you have been told is mostly false. Mostly false. Well, I would submit to you that what you were told is mostly true. Why? Because you can also go and you can Google every one of the Democrats who voted against this and see how much money they got from the pharmaceutical industry. 400,000, Cory Booker? Now, to Cory Booker's credit, it's my understanding, I haven't verified this, that he has since refused to take money from the pharmaceutical industry. But he's not the only one that took 400,000. I mean, if you look at the senators, the Democratic representatives who took money, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry, then do you have to question the loyalty of the Democratic Party to people who are poor, who are marginalized, to the middle class? And do you have to question your own loyalty to the Democrat Party? Think about it. David Brooks has an article in the New York Times that says that moderates have failed Black people, African Americans. And I would change the title of his article to say liberals and progressives have failed African Americans, because it's not the moderates so much that have been advocating for social programs, affirmative action, and that type of thing. It's been liberals and progressives. And so he said that they failed because the thinking was that education was the key to Black people making it in America. And the truth of the matter is that's not the case. And education does not assure African Americans of success. Well, let's deconstruct this for a few moments. And again, you're going to hear me say some things that may piss you off, may upset you, but, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. What I would love for you to do is think about what I'm saying. What I would love for you to do is do your own research. And so I'm not a fan of Clarence Thomas, but I think we make a mistake when we dismiss anybody simply because we don't like what they say most of the time. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. One thing, he asked a question that I find compelling. He asked, instead of busing, instead of forced integration, taking Black people from their own neighborhood in Black schools, forcing them to go to white schools, which ended up very traumatic for everybody, he said, why couldn't the money be put into Black schools? Think about that. Why couldn't the money have been put into Black schools, into Black teachers? If it had been, what would be different today? Someone said, an African-American man once said, that to be educated in America as a Black man is to be educated to be a white man. And so the problem is not African Americans and African Americans' ability to learn and benefit from the educational system and to be a productive part of society. The problem is deeper than that. The problem is what is the purpose of education and what are we being taught? And so to be educated in America as a person of color is to diminish your self-awareness, your self-concept, is to diminish your sense of who you are, is to diminish and negate your African ancestry, your Native American ancestry, and it is to totally buy into the lie of white supremacy, and it's to basically to sell your soul. So let's talk about race for a few minutes. I was watching Morgan Freeman, and again, simplistic thinking is saying, because this is true, that can also be true. And so Morgan Freeman says, let's stop talking about race. He goes, race is not the issue. He said in 1960, 80% of all Black households had a father there. Well, that's true. That's true. But what happened in the 60s that changed that? What happened in the 60s? So when I was a student at Rutgers doing my undergrad in religion, we had a visiting professor, a lecturer, a Caucasian woman, who had worked in the ironbound section of Newark during the 60s. Now, the ironbound section of Newark is the manufacturing area. It's where the manufacturing jobs were then, and still it's the place where there are many jobs. Manufacturing jobs have left somewhat. But the ironbound section of Newark is still a thriving economy. And so she said she worked at the front office of a large manufacturing plant in the 60s. And her instructions were, if a black man applied for a job, you had to let him fill the application. And when he left, you were to throw the application in the trash. Now think about it for a moment. Now, welfare came about, for the most part, through Democrats, progressive liberals. There were different names for it. But did you know that in order to get welfare in the 60s, the man could not be in the house? He can't find a job. Nobody will hire him. And to get government assistance, he can't be in the house. They would go so far as to come into your house and look in your closets to make sure there was no male clothes there. I also learned from an African-American friend of mine who worked in a high position in the social service agency during that time, and she said if a young black girl got pregnant, in order to get benefits, she had to leave her parents' house. So think about it. Let's look at the destruction of the black family, and let's look at what's being said about why there are no black men in households and we have single-family households. And let's deconstruct that, and let's be willing to call it what it is. The systematic destruction of the black family has been on purpose. And black men have been blamed, or black women have been blamed, when neither party really knew what was going on. I benefited from affirmative action. And people say Clarence Thomas should not talk against affirmative action because he benefited. Well, I think affirmative action was the wrong solution. It was putting a Band-Aid on the problem. Affirmative action did not say that the American educational system was not adequate. It did not say that white supremacy did not have all the answers, that white people did not have all the answers. It did not say that we really screwed it up education-wise and we don't know what we're doing. It didn't say that we're no smarter than you are. What it said was, because you've been disadvantaged, we're going to give you some advantages. And so the implication was that the education system that we were allowed to assimilate into was superior. And therefore, our innate knowledge, our innate wisdom was inferior and certainly not adequate. And so I benefited from affirmative action. And before I became spiritually awake, I sold my soul. I was used, I was manipulated by white men, by corporate America to get black men fired. When I finally woke up, they were trying to get me to fire a black woman. I didn't know why. She had filed a complaint against a white man in another office who had put his hands on her body. I was managing a loan office, and my supervisor called me and said, I'm sending you this woman. And his words were, keep her for a few days and fire her ass. It's exactly what he said to me. Now, prior to that, I would have done exactly what he said. I was so busy saying yes. In order to get this job, I had to promise I would never listen to my husband, and I was never going to have another child. That's how I got promoted. But what I saw was that a black man was a threat, and still a threat to corporate America. A light-skinned black woman, not so much. I became a threat when I said, hell no, you fire her yourself. So when we look at America today and the situation of black people, we have to go all the way back and see what the core issues were. Now, I could take you probably to any bar, any club, maybe not now because of social distancing, in Newark and in any urban area, Philadelphia, and you'll find a group of black men sitting in the bar, been there most of the day, and around 4 o'clock, they'll look at their watch and say, time to go home. And when they go home, they'll say they've been out looking all day. Is that so hard to understand? When you've been out looking and looking and looking and can't get hired, a young man I was working with in one state, a brilliant young man as a matter of fact, said to me, he says, when McDonald's won't hire you and you have children, he goes, what are you to do? When McDonald's won't hire you, a black man is a threat, not because you think he's violent. That's the shadow that you're projecting. A black man is a threat because of the nature of his soul, the strength of his soul, the strength of his character. And he is a threat to the establishment because as much as black people have been analyzed and dissected, the status quo simply doesn't understand what is it that keeps the black man going. What is it that gives the black man his strength and his power? I know as a black woman, I have been used to marginalize and diminish black men. And I've written about this, I've talked about it, and I've said that I am so sorry because I was naive. In my own first marriage, basically, you have to promise you don't listen to anything that he says. When our son was sick, I told him, I make more money than you stay home. What does that do for a marriage? What does that do for a relationship? Now, what's the other side of this? Black Lives Matter. To who? Do Black Lives matter to black people? Do Black Lives matter to black people? You see, what has happened up until now in the world is we solve problems by making someone else an enemy. We are so deeply entrenched in our own self-identification, our political affiliation, our loyalty to one party or the other, most of it not in our interest, that we fail to be truthful even to ourselves, even to ourselves. We want to win, we want to be heard, we want to be right. Can we negate the criticism that says that black lives don't matter to black people? Can we negate that? Someone said to me, a dear friend said to me this week, and it was very troubling. A Caucasian woman said to me that she was in an anti-racism workshop, and she was told if she believed in the law of attraction, she was racist. That's pure BS. That is pure BS. We cannot get from where we are to where we can go as a nation if we do not move beyond the particularity of our own experience, if we don't commit to telling the truth to ourselves, to living the truth, to being the truth, and demanding truth from those who represent us. Black on black crime is a problem. Yes, it is true that black people have internalized the consciousness of the oppressor, and the oppressor has been white people. That's true. But in 2020, it does not help us. It does not help us to blame white people and not be accountable for our own actions. There are African American men that are today out protesting, that are on Facebook and social media, that are blasting white people, that fail to have any meaningful relationship with a young black boy. In fact, they are terrified of young black boys. I have sat with upward mobile black people who denigrate all young black men, who will walk. My nephew, God bless him, Floyd Brown, Reverend Floyd Brown. He used to say when he was a kid, he said, if you're walking down the street in Newark or East Orange, any urban area, it's, 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, in between Saturday and Sunday. He goes, the African-American clergy with his collar turned back, instead of approaching you and greeting you, is going to cross on the other side of the street. But the Nation of Islam, the Muslim minister, is going to grab your hand and say, and greet you. That's true. That's true. And so there are black men today who are ranting and raging against white supremacy, against white people killing black people, who refuse to be in relationship with our own children, with our own grandchildren, with your own children. The hip-hop generation, the rap generation, has been ridiculed by black people. And some of it's true. This is not either or, it's not black or white. My son Sylvester set me down, this was years ago, and he called me a hypocrite. He wanted to show the kids he was watching, the nieces and nephews, redemption. And I didn't want him to show it. And he said, he goes, you're a hypocrite. You say that you care about young people. Sit down and watch this. Well, I watched redemption, and I repented. I saw where the black community, black men had let Tupac down. Tupac had a vision. Tupac saw what a lot of black men and black women are not willing to see. Well, as far as the language calling women this and that, that's wrong. The other side of that is in seminary, I heard more cussing in seminary than I have ever heard in my life. And that's the truth. I do my best not to lie. I heard more cussing in seminary amongst the black students than I've ever heard in my life. I cussed. I promised Jesus a couple of weeks ago I was going to stop cursing. That's one thing I need y'all to help me with. But my point is, black lives do matter, but they have to also matter to black people. And the way forward on the issue of race is not just demonizing white people. It's also being accountable. It's also being accountable. The police and the criminal justice system. Well, if you listen to Joe Biden, and what he's saying, he's basically being very cautious and he's saying nothing. He's sounding like a politician. He said, in 90 days, we'll form a task force. Even black people in Congress, a black man, Clyburn, was on talking in a way that said to me, and this is just my analysis, you can disagree, is that perhaps he's getting funded by the police union. What is my point? My point is both parties are corrupt and both parties are sold out to special interests. And how does that benefit you? How does that benefit you? Right now, the Democrats certainly have more meat, more substance to the bills that they're passing. But all of it is insanity. It is absolute insanity, and it will change nothing. Why? Because we're not facing the truth. Yes, officers need to be held accountable. They need to go to prison. But you know what? Officers are also being scapegoated. In every city I have ever worked, I have gone straight to the police with the complaints that I have gotten from the community as an advocate. I wanted to hear both sides. And so I speak to you from experience of talking with people in the police department. And I know that what is expected of them is unreasonable. I know that there is a culture in the police, a culture that's part of law enforcement, that if we don't address that, no law is going to change. We got excited when they had to have cameras, body cameras. We have to stop being so naive. We have to start asking the difficult questions, and we have to start stepping up saying, this is my country, and I have the power to lead. My running for president is not so much about me as it is about you. Joe Biden will not change anything in America. Why? Because America's system is corrupt. It is designed where there need to be an underclass. $15 an hour minimum wage, based upon how much it costs to live, is nothing. When do we stop taking the crumbs while they get the whole loaf? When you think about the fight over minimum wage, is insanity. The workforce is not honored, is not respected. $15 an hour when you have 2 children, 4 in a family, where can you live? Where can you live? And so the scheme is, the system says you have to work 2.5 jobs. Trump has done more for black people. BS. There was a time, my background is banking and finance. There was a time that I could not approve a loan for you. It doesn't matter how good your credit was. I could not approve a loan for you if your debts came to more than 25% of your income. Think about that. There was a time when your debts could not come to more than 25% of your income in order for me to consider you for a loan. How much of our income is now going to paying just for housing and health insurance? Think about it. Think about it. So even $15 an hour is no money based upon this system and this economy. Why is affordable housing such a big deal? Why are rents so high? Why do we have to work 2.5 jobs and then we should be happy because of that? These are the questions that I want you to start thinking about. As president, we have the power. If the president is not fighting the Congress, if we're not in partisan gridlock, and that's what's going to happen if Trump or Biden is president again. Someone said to me, stay out of it, Audrey, because if we take the Senate and Trump is elected again, we're going to impeach him over again. Well, see, there's an agenda even of the Democratic Party that doesn't involve you. How is impeaching Trump all over again going to help you in the economy? You with losing your house, you with your mortgage. How is that going to benefit you? Bob Dylan made a song back in the 60s that is so relevant today. It says, we're all a pawn in their games. We're all a pawn in their game. If either one of them are president, we're going to be stuck in partisan gridlock because special interest demands it. There is so much money involved, and they have sold their souls that we will get enough to keep us quiet and shut us up, and nothing will change. Unless this system is disrupted by not me, but we the people, until we send the old boys network into retirement, until we disrupt Washington, D.C., the power structure, and say, hell no, this is our country and we have the power, nothing is going to change. 70% of my cabinet will be women. We have the power, if the president is working with Congress, we have the power to add to the Supreme Court. We can go from 9 members on the Supreme Court to 13. What would America be like if the majority on the Supreme Court was not right or left, but was women? A Supreme Court majority women. Think about that. 70% of my cabinet will be women. And just because you have a vagina doesn't mean that you qualify for leadership in this day and age. Voting gender is not something I approve of. There are men who are far more feminine and far more balanced than even I am. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing balance of the feminine and masculine together, but in order to disrupt this patriarchal white supremacist system, we need women who are courageous and strong. As I close, I want to bring the women who have inspired me. Harriet Tubman has been my inspiration all of my life. Was Harriet Tubman reasonable or realistic? Madam C.J. Walker, the first female millionaire in the United States. She had no government money. She had no support. She barely had an education, but she was unstoppable. She was Rockefeller's neighbor. All of the programs have rendered us dependent, on the government, dependent on the Democrat Party, and we have lost sight of our power. We have lost sight of our healing potential. We have lost sight of our shared humanity. Sojourner Truth, she says, ain't I a woman? She warned that there would be no freedom, no liberation if women were not free. We have an opportunity that will never come again. And we owe it to ourselves and future generations. My running for president is me saying to each and every one of you, we can do this together. I'm smart enough to pick a vice president that has the strength and the capabilities I do not have. I am smart enough to build a cabinet of people who have the strength and capability that I do not have. But when we separate spirituality from politics, spirituality from economics, spirituality from work, spirituality from anything, the result is a schizophrenic relationship with life itself. Because the essence of who we are is spirit. America is called to lead the world in a spiritual renaissance. Every problem that we have fundamentally, the core, the issue is we have not recognized and acknowledged who we are as spirit. We have not recognized and acknowledged our shared humanity. And so the problems that we see They look differently from a spiritual perspective. Native American, original family, first people. That indigenous wisdom is so necessary. The white male psychic of dominate, aggression, greed, and control, that has destroyed the waters, the oceans, the environment. It's destroying the planet Earth. We cannot afford 4 more years of patriarchy. I'm saying that we can take the White House. We can take the government. We can, for the first time, have a nation of the people, for the people, and by the people. We can rethink and reimagine what policing looks like. We can have an attorney general that is not committed to me as president or anybody, but is there to enforce the law. First of all, in America, law and order is BS. It's pure BS. There are 2 sets of laws, one for white people and one for black people, one for people with money and one for people with not. There's moral relativity. You know, anyone in prison who's there for a nonviolent crime needs to be let out. And I will see that that happens. You can't let them out overnight because where's the reentry? That's the other thing. You know, there has to be a process, but it is wrong. It is morally wrong to have anyone in prison when the administration we have is corrupt. We have criminals running this nation. We have criminals running America. Criminals. And yet we're talking about law and order and law enforcement. Beloved, I need you. I need you to start thinking. I need your support. I need a campaign team. I need resources. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Let me say that one more time. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So there are 2 words there, thoughtful. And the purpose of this live is to try and challenge you and inspire you to be thoughtful, to think about the things that I've said. I'm willing to be challenged. I'm willing to talk about any issue involving this nation, foreign policy, the economy, war, any of that, the budget. Try me. Let's have town hall meetings and I'm there. The problem with debates, the way they're set up, the people don't manage it. We never get to ask the questions. Ask me the questions. But this is not about me so much as an opportunity for all of you to bring the fullness of who you are into the American government. We the people have the power. And I know just from Facebook that some of you are brilliant. You have amazing ideas. You know what the solutions are. I need you. I need you to step up and be thoughtful and committed. If you're not committing time, if you're not committing resources, then you're not committed. In order for this system to be disrupted and for sustainable change to happen, it requires money. But not money to make me look good and stand up. You give politicians money to lie to you. When I ran 4 years ago, I said the money given to politicians should be invested in communities. That politician should be breaking ground for a swimming pool, a computer lab, a new school building that's not asbestos filled and full of and the whole old decrepit building with no windows that was built 100 years ago. Politicians should be forced to be accountable for the money you give them. Beloved, we have the power to begin the world over again. That is so true. Thank you for listening to me. Please email me at healingsoulofamerica@gmail.com. I ask you to dig deep and make a donation. Email me and I'll give you my PayPal information. Once I accept $5,000, then I have to form a structured campaign, and we want to do that this week. There are lots of positions open. It's an opportunity for any of you listening to me to create for yourself what it is you want, to bring the fullness of your potential, your ideas, and your information onto the national stage. We want to have the biggest revival and festival and just celebrate the shift from fear to love. Celebrate the move from us versus them to oneness. Celebrate being powerless to being all powerful. Celebrate the move from corruption and crime and fear, to living in joy, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Healing Soul of America at Gmail. I need you. America needs you. Your children and grandchildren need you. I love you. God bless you. And thank you so much for listening. God bless you.